Hello and welcome to a new video on this channel. You may have seen stuff in here before, some very basic tactical analysis videos, but this is somewhat of an introduction to what I plan to do over the next few months, starting with this off-season and starting today with the appointment of Rob Edwards. So in general, I'd like to do this kind of covering transfers, kind of news that comes about, games, breaking down games, discussing with you guys kind of the outcome of these fixtures. A lot of fixtures will be coming up in the next few months. A lot of things to discuss, and there's a big change going on at the club right now. It feels, at least on the surface, that's what's happening. There's been a lot of talk, and this is the first time we've seen some action take place, and that's with the appointment of Rob Edwards. So, if you listen to the Watford Buzz podcast, we're still doing that, and there's still something I want to be talking on and discussing things. But this is just another way of kind of diving into these subjects in a slightly different manner. Maybe have some visual cues here which might help with some of the things we look to discuss. So yeah, that's that out the way. But the main thing I want to discuss today is, of course, the news of Rob Edwards signing a 2-year contract and becoming our new head coach. It kind of came not out of nowhere. There was some talk of Rob Edwards previously, but it wasn't necessarily one that we thought was definitely kind of going to go through. It seemed up until today that John Eustace was the favourite candidate. But going along the lines of what the club has said about looking at a young English coach to be the next guy to come in, yeah, we've gone through with that, and we've quickly moved on Rob Edwards from Forest Green Rovers. I'm not sure how much or how little you've had the opportunity to see Forest Green Rovers, but they earned promotion. Had a very good season, by all accounts. They were quite dominant in the league, and you know, Rob Edwards has emerged as this really well-respected coach within the Football League structure, and it's an interesting choice from us. I think it's a positive one. It fits, as I said, a lot of what we claim to be looking for, so we can find some real positives from that. And it's a much different approach to what we've had in recent years. It's a stark contrast to what we've got currently with Hodgson, and I think it's quite an exciting appointment. So we're going to go into a little bit more detail in regards to Rob. So firstly, you know, 39-year-old coach, younger coach. He's got some experience with him playing. He had a kind of relatively short career. Injuries, didn't make a ton of appearances, but he has managed at some interesting levels. He was the under-16s head coach for the England setup prior to joining Forest Green Rovers, which is kind of partly where he kind of made a bit of a name for himself in terms of his coaching style and philosophies. So that's something that earned him a good reputation, and obviously his time at Forest has been really good, positive. He's got really good kind of background in terms of coaching, but it seems to be his man management style has been very highly talked about. He has a good relationship with the players, the staff, the fans, which, you know, we kind of needed someone who could maybe be a little bit more in touch with a few of those things. But there's a history there of developing younger players, and he's continued that at Forest Green Rovers. They've got quite a young squad, and it's developed nicely. He's kind of got his ideas across very quickly and implemented them successfully, which is obviously something which everyone looks for, and especially us. So we'll talk about his style of play. Obviously, that's kind of more we want to discuss than anything, really, what to expect from him, as well as going into how we can help him as a club, what we can do to facilitate this new appointment and allow us to be successful. Because obviously the change of approach is something that might be required with an acquisition of someone like Edwards, who you look at as more of a project coach, someone to perhaps build around, which could be very interesting to us. So in terms of style of play, in general, he's going to be someone that's be operating with a 3 at the back system. It's something we've discussed in the Watford Buzz. It's a style of play that's very versatile. It's adaptable. You can find ways to play in different sorts of games, but also if you are ultimately looking to gain promotion, it's a system that you can take from being very offensive based to defensive based without having to change a lot of recruitment style. You can still have that flexibility in there. You can use similar players, you can use similar approaches, but you can tweak it. And it's a versatile way of playing that's becoming very popular. You look at teams that are looking to gain promotion or even avoid relegation. It's often the 3 at the back system that's being used successfully, and it's a common theme with a lot of the managers we've been looking at in this build up to this appointment. There's been a few that have been playing in a similar manner, but Edwards has got some interesting ways of doing things, and I think it's worth us kind of discussing a little bit further. So firstly, we'll kind of look at where this team ranked actually real quick. Okay, so just kind of going through how the team fared over the course of the season. Obviously, you look at the overview there. It's very clear that that Forest Green were pretty dominant in a lot of ways. They finished the season with expected points of 86.4, finished 84 points. But the things we want to point out in particular, so I mean, XG and goals conceded and expected goals against, they're obviously two really easy ones to look at, but they're impressive ones. Goals, you can't look here. Expected goals, sorry. So I mean, expected goals, 81.2. They slightly underperformed, but that's common, very common. 75 is actually a pretty close differential. It's not bad at all. But dominant, obviously first in the league there, and the same goes for expected goals against as well. So expected goals against, right down at the bottom in terms of that, but sorry, it's actually at the top, isn't it? Because it's 41.42, so the lowest expected goals against ratio in the league, and also they conceded 44, so it's not bad. It's good. It's really positive. I mean, to be the team that's obviously scoring the most and conceding the least, that's what you look for, and it's hard to draw from in some ways. When you have a team that's dominant like that, you might look at these things as being expected if they're winning the league, of course, but it's worth noting these are important metrics, as simplistic as they are in some ways. It's worth pointing out. Again, though, we touched on earlier, working with younger players, age of the squad is a pretty young squad, 25 years old average age. Obviously, our demographic is a little bit different. We might be expecting some change on that front, but working with younger players is something we claim to want to do. So to have a team that is so successful running a younger age kind of range like that is impressive. So that's something that we should keep in mind. But this next thing kind of goes into how they've set up and how they play, or how they did play at Forest Green Rovers, and what Edwards looks to bring out from his team. So from an attacking standpoint, just some of the metrics that stand out. In particular, you got the crosses, which Forest Green comfortably at the top there. I mean, per 90 minutes, 17 crosses per game. I mean, the accuracy is pretty decent. I mean, the crossing accuracy is always going to be relatively low, but it's decent. It's towards the top end there. But, they're getting in 17 a game on average. And that's so much that comes from those wing-backs. And we're going to be discussing the wing-backs quite a lot as we go on here, because they are very important to... They are very important to the way that Rob Edwards' teams operate, and how I expect us to look in the coming season. As well as the crosses, we also have seen progressive runs have been something that stood out. Hold on a second. Excuse this. Yeah, so right towards the top again. I mean, per 90, they're still very, very high here. 15.23, and again, a lot of that is coming from those wing backs. They are able to drive forward, getting crosses in there, offensively extremely useful, and they have to be top players. And I think that's something we're going to have to address, and we'll get into that further shortly. We'll continue just discussing here the style of play and what to expect from this Rob Edwards team. So kind of starting off in the first phase, we'll talk about possession, how the team operates when on the ball. Now, you can see here we'll just look at a passing network from the most recent game here. So that you see already, back three, obviously it's a 3-4-1-2. So you've got two deep midfielders, a little bit more of an advanced kind of attacking midfielder, two strikers, and your wing backs are pushing up nice and high. We've seen very similar systems. We've seen similar systems deployed at Watford in recent years. This one's a little bit more possession dominant. It's not massively kind of like not 60-70% possession, but it is a little bit higher. They do want to control the ball. There's going to be some possession in there. At times it can be quite narrow, but they have the athleticism in the team to be able to get wide, move quickly, play at a high tempo, and still get back into shape and organise. They're not necessarily a sit-back, deep defensive team. We'll get into that further shortly. But yeah, quite narrow at times, can press out to be wide, control the ball. Timing's really good in the pass. They have to be precise. When you're playing in that back three, it's all about kind of finding those spaces and working those angles. It's a little bit different, but if you have the control and the ability to do so, it can be really, really effective. The centre midfielder in there, which is something we're probably going to be expecting or hoping to see Imran Louza kind of operating in this area, playing quite deep, picking up the ball, allowing those centre-backs to move around him, and finding ways to be incisive and get the ball forwards, progressing the ball from deeper areas of midfield. That's a real key component of this team, is having someone that can do that and kind of dictate that tempo. And I think Imran Louza is someone that definitely can be that player for us. I think if it comes to retaining one player this season, he might be the most important down to that, or due to that aspect of the game. And the centre-backs as well. This is something that is a little bit of a concern for me. Is the centre back play? It's good. I like how he uses the centre backs, but whether we are capable, as we are, I'm not sure we're capable of kind of executing this game plan. And it's a vital part of how this Forest team attacks. So we have to kind of find a way of doing this, and maybe that means kind of dipping into the market and changing the profile of our centre backs to facilitate this new game plan. But they're centre-backs that do push up. I kind of went through and looked at some of their kind of more recent attacking plays, looked at some of their goals, and the centre-backs are quite heavily involved in a lot of them. It's not what we've seen previously when it comes to how we play with a back three. This one is a little bit more faster tempo, a little bit more fluid, and more engaging in that back line. I will kind of just discuss real quickly here. Just kind of giving you an example right now. So it's very basic, but we'll go over it nonetheless, just because I want to be able to kind of visualize what I mean when it comes to the use of that back three. And also some of the problems that we've had previously when playing the back three. And we even have some of those players left over in this team now. So, we have to be aware of that and be cognizant of the fact that it's going to be a different approach, and we have to find ways to blend this team with new acquisitions and find a way to kind of progress. And I think that's where we have to be a little bit patient too. So what are we trying to avoid when we're looking at this back three? What don't we want to see? This is something we're going to demonstrate for you right now, which we've seen far too often as Watford fans. Especially you think back to the Walter Mazzari time period. We played that back three, and it could be quite stagnant, or even Vladimir Ivic at times as well. What do we want to avoid? And for me, it's always the dreaded U shape of possession which comes about. So obviously yellows here are Watford, and the red's just going to represent the opponents right now. So very often you end up with this outside centre-back on the ball. Generally, they're going to have most of the possession. We're going to see them with the ball a lot. Think back to Yunus Kabul on the right under Mazzari. We saw him often with the ball. Where's the outlet? How do we progress the ball? And how do you get out of these situations? So oftentimes, what's going to happen is you're going to have the opponent is going to be looking to cover space. So you'll be having someone come in, and where are your options? Suddenly, everything's closed off. Midfielders are coming in. You're trying to look for space, but it's difficult. It's difficult to find. So the opposition then, they're going to leave you with the one option. They're going to drop off a little bit. They're going to allow you that space. And where's the ball going to go? It's going to recycle. It's going to come across that back line. And the same thing is going to happen as you get to this side, right? This is what we see time and time and again. Now, often the way that a defender is going to look to get out of this situation, you can have a runner. Sorry, I keep doing that. You can have a runner from the front, and you're just going to get that ball going over the top, and you end up the long ball situation. And we all know how that ends for us. It becomes repetitive. It's ineffective. So how do you look to get out of this situation? How do you look to find ways of being more positive in possession, allowing yourself to play from the back, but actually kind of open up space and be able to attack and build from there? So we'll look at Edwards, kind of how he does this and some of the options he has. So in this situation, you've got a few ways you can get out. Now, for wing back, can kind of press on, try and commit, allow a little bit of space for the centre back to advance. And you've also got some play that can be kind of manipulated from the 10 here and the wing back together. Freedom of movement, fluidity, that's something that you have to give freedom in these positions. And just allow those players to make these decisions, because there are options, and you might see a wing back kind of dropping in a little bit, maybe some switching of position, making things confusing, allowing that ball to progress, or space for the centre back. And that's the difference. We didn't have that at all previously. We didn't have players that were able to play a little bit more incisively and positively and take some risks. And we need to have outside centre backs that are willing to do this. This is just one example. There's plenty we could go through, perhaps at a later date. This is just one example of an area where we struggled before, and I think we still will struggle unless we kind of change a few things in terms of personnel. But another example here I'll go through real quick is use of the wing backs and the centre backs in those attacks. So you get the ball here on the wing back, and you're pressing up the field. Now it can still be difficult. You've kind of got that one man out wide in these kind of 3-5-2 setups. So if you are playing against a more traditional 4-3-3 or a 4-4-2, you're going to have a little bit of a double up kind of on the outside. So you might see the forward come and try and stretch that play a little bit, commit the fullback, but you want to keep those players active and hopefully in the box. So how do you get this fullback forward? Obviously, one of the options is to have someone that's good at carrying the ball and can beat a man, but that does bring some risk to it. So you end up having the trend that was kind of brought about from Sheffield United a few years ago, where you had the underlapping centre-back. This is obviously a commitment from that centre-back. There's some offensive and defensive risk, but it does take out a player from the game. If he's able to come through, you then create options for space to run into, whether you're committing a man or you're forcing a track of a runner. This is all very positive for the attacking team. You commit that run, you've got step in, you have some space, obviously you get a step in, you get the ball over the top and behind, and you've got someone in those four positions. It's actually surprising how often number 6 from Green Rovers is getting into the box and causing problems. And most of the time it's a decoy. It's not necessarily that ball's going to get to 6 and he's going to travel on, have a shot on goal or get a pass, but it creates space, it creates opportunities, and it also allows your wing backs to get forward. Midfielders can join the attack as well. You can have some width on the other side, or you can come narrow. And if you're getting your wing backs forward in these positions, I mean, the amount of numbers you can get into the box. So often you look at Forest Green Rovers goals, and the numbers they're kind of getting around the box, in the box, from the left or right hand side. If you're having this ball kind of cut back, you can really be effective in these situations, and it can be really difficult for the opposition to defend such numbers coming forward. So that was just kind of one example there. As I said, I would quite like to go over this maybe in a little bit more of a slightly more advanced medium than just kind of this basic tactics board here, just to kind of go through some of these patterns of play and ways that we might see this team develop over the next few months. So yeah, that's kind of offensively, that's what we're going to see a lot of. I'll just kind of see if I've got any more notes down here. Yeah, I mean, look, wing backs attacking the box. 2 forwards can drift wide a little bit too, to allow some kind of freedom of movement, fast tempo. Yeah, so, okay, that's the main thing on the ball. Off the ball, again, really interesting. It's a lot of high press, high intensity, out of possession. They're going to get compact at times, but again, they have the athleticism to be able to get wide, be aggressive in those situations, and they set traps in midfield, which is really nice. The way they press can be very smart. They're still patient, but they don't like to have time with the opponent on the ball. If they lose the ball, they can be quick to try and win it back. If the opponent has the ball, they can make it awkward, and we've seen before this does give you a lot of benefits in the attack as well. If you're turning balls over, if you're making the opposition make mistakes and you're capitalising on these chances, especially when you have the opportunity to get so many numbers forward, you can really punish teams that make mistakes. And in the Championship, you are going to have teams that try and play out from the back a little bit. And you're also going to have teams that aren't quite good enough to do so. And it doesn't even have to be playing out from the back. It could be through midfield. If you're smart in where you attack the other team, if you were well drilled, if there's a clear understanding, but it's not just kind of free-for-all pressing, which we've seen kind of under even Ranieri recently. There's some real free-for-all pressing without any structure, and it can be chaotic. But if it's done correctly, there's still holes, but it can be a lot more manageable from a defensive standpoint, from your own defensive standpoint, but also really effective too. So hopefully we're going to see some of that, and I think that's probably the first thing we're going to really see come through. That's quite easy to start to integrate early on. It becomes more refined. The offensive stuff, the way we work the ball, might take a little bit more time to develop, but this, I think, the first thing that's going to be evident is the intensity of the team on and off the ball. It'll be interesting to see how we adapt to that in terms of current players, because we do think we do have some good athletes, but they've not really been asked to do that too much over the time of the Pozzo era. It's not had too many pressing coaches, but this one's definitely a little bit more aggressive. So yeah, that's kind of the off the ball stuff there, covered a little bit more. Now we will go into more detail in this stuff, in these kind of aspects in the coming weeks. This is still very early on. Had some time to do some research, but I'd like to do a lot more. I'm interested, and it's good to have someone actually physically appointed now, so we can, with confidence, go and look at these coaches, look at these games, break them down, and try and bring you some actual information we feel confident on, and give ourselves a better idea of what to expect. So yeah, a little bit of a kind of breakdown there of style of play. But then the next question is really, as a club, how do we support him? How do we make these changes in terms of the club's philosophies going forwards? What can we do to help Rob Edwards, his new team? And I think that obviously the main answer that people will come to is time. I think time is important. It is somewhat of a project, and we're going to hear that word project a lot over the next few months, I'm sure, but it's true, and we have to accept the fact that we are looking at probably the biggest shift in approach off and on the pitch since the Pozzos joined. Really, there's going to be a big change around. I mean, Roy Hodgson's side and setup compared to Rob Edwards is hugely different, and I expect us to have some bumps along the road, and we have to kind of find ways to navigate this. It's not going to be perfectly smooth transition. We're going to have to kind of learn some things, and that means having the time, the opportunity to make some mistakes, or just have those opportunities to continue to develop rather than being too reactive. It might be quite quickly that things work. It might not, but we have to allow them the opportunity, because I think the potential outcome, is worth the short-term negatives. We don't want to be in a situation like we've seen before. I mean, there's lots of, every time you look at previous coaches, there's other factors that play out. But you could look at someone like Nathan Jones' time at Stoke, where things weren't really clicking, the results weren't coming, but you could see the underlying performance was there. There were lots of positives, but all these other factors just kind of contributed towards this negative outcome, and eventually it led to him being sacked. And obviously now you look at how he's doing at Luton, you can see there is some promise there if you can be bold enough to stick with it. I think we have to try, unless there's some real standout negatives. I think based on everything we've seen so far and what kind of background we've seen of Edwards, we have to really trust our appointment here for a little while. I mean, to say the least, a little while. But I think the next thing in terms of supporting him, though, will really be recruitment, because we expect a bigger turnaround than perhaps last time. We're in a little bit of a better financial situation based on the contracts we have of players that are at the club, and also those that we're most likely or definitely going to sell. You look at like Emmanuel Dennis, Ismail Assar, they're going to bring in fees, they're going to allow us some freedom in this transfer window and the next transfer window. Also parachute payments. We should be in a real dominant position when it comes to finances. Obviously the other teams being relegated, they maybe don't have the same assets that we do to sell, but they're going to be able to compete as well. This time I expect us to be a little bit more active in the market, because we have that freedom. We don't have players that are on big contracts stuck at the club that we're struggling to move on till late in the window, like the Craig Dawsons or Etienne Capoue, these sorts of players that it stops us working. We can't really plan too much around because we have to get them off the books, and it comes around quite late, and you don't have time to replace them. So I think this time we have to be more active, more earlier on, and also due to the fact we are changing how we play so heavily and the sorts of players that we need. So what kind of players do we need? What are the main areas we have to address? I mean, first for me, I touched on there with the centre backs earlier. That is a big one. I think allowing yourself kind of freedom to bring in some players that are able to play in those areas. The outside centre backs would be really key for us. We have some quality at centre back, but often, I think you look at the ones that we would say are stand out good quality for the Championship. Siriata obviously performed very well last time in the Championship. I think there's a chance for him in this team, but it's most likely to be in that central position. Someone that can be combative, basically head and tackle everything that moves. That's Siriata's job if he's in that central position. The possession is less integral to that role, and it suits Francisco Siriata. He's someone that can play the ball nice and tidy, but not expansive in his possession. We discussed that when he signed originally. He's not someone that's going to look to break down the midfield, but he can be tidy and just keep that kind of short passing game going. And the same goes for Matty Pollock. He's not an expensive passer, but he's someone that we expect to be around the squad. Even Trooster Kong, again, fits that sort of role. But those outside centre-backs, that's where the question marks start to arise. Who's going to play in there? Craig Cathcart? Potentially. There's actually a chance he could do that. I think Cathcart is probably one of those who's a little more suited to playing into that area. Samir could do that as well, but I think they're still a little bit off what we're really looking for. I wouldn't surprise me to see Samir operate that left-hand side and be able to push up with that left foot. The right-hand side centre-back, I think, is the one where if we were to see someone come in, it might be to fill that space. So that's definitely worth keeping an eye on from that centre-back position. Also, wing-backs, kind of the next step forward. Wing-backs are vitally important to this system. Now, we actually have 2 good wing-backs. I think it's fair to say that Edwards would be quite pleased with the options he has should Kiko Femenia and Hassan Kamara be the 2 that he has available. But for me, tweeted about this earlier, is Kiko Femenia going to be fit? Is he going to be able to play this many games? I really question that. I don't think he's going to be able to at all. We've seen how many times he's been brought off early in games this season. And how many, he's missed quite a few. Even the championship season, we had the same sort of thing. I think he's a great player. I think he fits this system perfectly. It's a shame it's come a couple of years too late to him. I still think he'll contribute, but I do think we need to have someone there we can guarantee, or at least hope to see a lot more minutes from, to allow us to play in this way, because wing-backs are so important. We talked about the carrying of the ball, we talked about the crosses, delivery into the box. A lot of that attack starts from those wide areas, and they're also key to engaging those presses as well. So we have to have someone that has minutes in their legs and is able to consistently be there. We've got backup in Jeremy Ngakia. Do we feel that he's able to work in this sort of team? He might be able to. Edwards might look at him and think, yeah, you know what, we can get something out of Ngakia, but I think we need someone a little bit more incisive, a little bit more efficient in possession. Next role, really, apart from that, I think the strikers, we have some good options. Depends who stays and who goes. But I like the mobility in the forward line. You look at João Pedro, Chicho Hernandez. These are players that can help us. I think we still might need reinforcements, but they're good players that can fit this. Midfield, though, I think we have to kind of adapt a little bit here. If Zinckernagel returns, I think that'd be a really good one for us. If we can bring him back, we can involve him in this setup. In that more attacking midfield position, he can play between the lines, he can get wide. I think he'd really suit that. I think that would be a player that Edwards would be quite keen to have. And I think if he has the option, it wouldn't surprise me if he's definitely in there, especially with the way that he's been able to kind of press at Forest. I think Nottingham Forest. I think that really does show some quality that Edwards would like if he's going to sit down and look at his time there. It wouldn't surprise me at all if he's a player he'd like to have as quite a central figure to this team. But the players alongside that, then, who takes up that third midfielder role? If you're thinking Luza, Zinckernagel, or someone like Zinckernagel, who's the next guy? Who's going to be next to them? And this is where we kind of have that depth. It's depth, but it's not quality depth. It's just kind of an accumulation of similar players. Tom Cleverley, Juraj Kucka potentially could stay. Musa Sissoko you expect to be off, but then you've got Dan Gosling. These are question marks, but I think the outsider here is Tom Dedibashiru is coming back. He had a good loan spell at Reading. He's maybe not the finished article, but I do like him in this system as well, and I think he could be a useful player for us. Whether or not we put the trust in there to kind of rely on him as a starter from week one remains to be seen, but I think we just need a little bit more quality added, a little bit more quality in depth, and that midfield could be quite effective to this team. They have to be players that can play the ball, and we've not really had that for a long time. Those sorts of creative players or possession-based players. So making that shift will be interesting. I do think we have some capable players there, but we do need to move on from a few. I think this is the time we expect to see the likes of Tom Cleverley and Dan Gosling. Those sorts of careers aren't really likely to continue, I don't think, in this new look Watford side. I will say, though, in terms of recruitment, one last thing to touch on there, Kane Wilson, who was the League 2 Player of the Year, Forest Green Rovers Player of the Year, 22-year-old right wing back, integral to the way that this Forest Green Rovers team operated. He's one that could potentially be looked at and suggested by Edwards. I think the club would be willing to entertain it. It's obviously a bit of a jump in quality. He's going from League 2, but he's got a lot of potential. He's very young still. He played at a very high level in League 2, and I think when you're bringing a new coach, often they kind of go back for former players. Sometimes it can be hit or miss, but I think in this sense, based on the fact that we are making quite a big shift in the way we play. We're making a lot of changes, I'd imagine, or quite a few in terms of recruitment and squad building. This is one you might be able to feel that you could take an educated risk on. If Edwards feels that he can make a step up, you trust him, I'd say. But also the real key for this one is it seems that Wilson's out of contract and is able to talk to clubs, which will be a huge, boost for us. Gives him the freedom to be able to talk to us and obviously come back and join his previous manager, as well as us kind of keeping those fees down and allowing us to invest elsewhere. It all really comes down to the way that we assess things, and if we decide that we're going to take the opinion of Edwards, should he believe that that Wilson's ready to make that step. If we take that opinion kind of seriously and we want to bring that in, or if we kind of keep that segregated recruitment approach, I think we need to merge the two a little bit more. In the coming months, and that's something we need to be doing in general with a few departments, but especially in regards to recruitment over this window, because it's going to be a different time for the club, and we have to learn to do things a little bit differently, and that comes from every area. I don't think it's just about hiring coaches; it's about recruitment, integration of departments, finding new ways to adapt and progress as a team and as a club off the field. And I think it's going to be interesting to see over the next few weeks how we do that. So that's really kind of covering the main things I wanted to talk about for this initial kind of coverage of Edwards' appointment. There's going to be a lot of time now to kind of look further, and hopefully we can come back with some more detailed discussion about what to expect. And obviously once pre-season starts coming around, we can start to see some of this stuff come through. Pre-season games, we're going to start to get an idea, a little feel for things. We'll see what training footage we kind of get to see, and yeah, it's going to be really interesting. But I think in general, guys, I think it's an appointment to be positive about. It's much more along the lines of, it's probably the most positive I've felt on an appointment since we brought Marco Silva in terms of how we look to move forward and change our style. I think that was a good move at the time. Obviously didn't work out, but I think this is kind of a reboot of that to me. I think this is an opportunity for us to grow. But I think we should be positive. Lots more to come over the coming weeks. Thanks for watching this first video. It's obviously probably a bit ropey. It's my first time doing this in this manner, but we'll learn. We'll get better at it. I guess like and subscribe. I don't really know if you guys are going to be watching, how you interact with YouTube, but this is going to be something I just post via Twitter mainly, and that's how you guys see it. But yeah, feel free, subscribe to it, like it, comment. Yeah, if you have any questions too, anything you want to discuss, we're more than happy to go into it, whether it's on here, on the Watford Buzz podcast. We'll talk about these things a little bit further. There's going to be a lot of coverage over the next few weeks, so I'm looking forward to doing it. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.